Oftentimes we talk about paying ourselves first, which seems to be very logical and makes the most sense. But did you realize that in an indirect way, whenever we stockpile for groceries in our homes or apartments, that is another form of paying ourselves first? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How you doing today? Hope that everybody's doing well. Welcome to another Friday. Wow, weekend's already here. Where did it go? All these busy, busy weekends coming, going. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very, very good. But sometimes people forget that when you actually stockpile for groceries, you are actually paying yourself first in an indirect manner. And that's something that every single person could do because we could always and should always find ways when we gather our food, find ways to save it and to share it too at times whenever you actually could. All right. But here are some more common sense logical tips that really help us all to pay ourselves first. Number one, put aside some budgeted amounts from whatever your income sources are towards paying a specific bill. You could do it one at a time, you could do it separately so you have it for the future. You see where I'm going with this. And that way, it makes it logical and easier to obtain important stuff like your rent, your utilities. You see where I'm going. Next, sometimes some folks keep only one type of a checking account specifically just for bill paying. I think that that's a logical thing to do. That's what that account, for example, is set aside for. That's what it is designed to do, and it will do its best. And it's easier for a person to manage. Next, decide to continue taking taking funds for fund building for emergency fund building, and it really is a priority. Emergencies happen. You're not going to get a written invitation. You're not going to know of an advanced emergency written in stone like an invitation. But we do know this: emergencies will happen. Okay, so let's take that as a huge priority, an emergency strike no matter what, whether we like it or not. Usually 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, we don't like to have an emergency. I don't think I know of anyone that likes to have an emergency. That's not good. But it's better to be prepared for that emergency that no one likes to have. Does that make sense? I believe it does. Next, once your bills are paid, check about what is left over. And honestly, hey, listen, it's an honest conversation you're having with you, yourself, and yourself. Once your bills are paid, check about what is actually left over and honestly assess what's going on. Because then you will really know what is left over for food and other life essentials. You see, being honest with yourself, with how you pay your bills, with your budget, with your income sources, okay, with your streams of income. Should you increase it? Are you okay with it? Are you okay with just cutting back? And of course, as the year goes on, we always talk more about things like that. It is really important. It is important, though, to recognize our stockpiles. Our stockpiles, again, since we talk about stockpiles on Stockpiling Friday, there's a reason I like to mention about stockpiling groceries at the end of the week. Why? Many employers pay their folks every alternate Friday, okay? Payday, for example. So I'm thinking, well, let's think about stockpiling on a Friday. Or many people, whether they get paid on Friday or not, only have the time to go grocery shopping, for example, on the weekend. Some people's weekends begin on a Friday, for example, although that can change at any time for any person. But the basic average mentality, and yes, hello, bird clock. Good morning, 6 a.m. As I record this at 6 a.m. Yeah, 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 yeah. But many people do get their sources of income or their paycheck or whatever at certain times of the week or certain times of the month. Being prepared mentally to think weekend. People pack up a lot of their chores, a lot of their running around for errands at this time. So it's a great time to assess, okay, where am I going with this? Let's talk briefly about an emergency fund and correlate that with stockpiling for groceries. Emergencies happen, as I mentioned before. But sometimes a person doesn't realize that, well, getting laid off, in my opinion, is an emergency. And many times people are not aware that that is going to happen. I've seen it. You could have the greatest job in the world and all of a sudden find out your company is getting laid off. What does that mean for you? That means your life is kind of on financial hold if you're not careful. That's why it is important to keep a whole bunch of shelf stable food available and not just for big things like getting laid off because we do count on our income sources. But sometimes, oftentimes, many times, our income sources out of the blue get cut off. Yikes. Not a good thing, not a good feeling. And to be unprepared is an awful feeling. So while the going is good, that's the time to say, you know what? It's not insignificant if I keep a couple of cans of this, that, here, there, and anywhere in your stockpile. It may seem insignificant at that moment, but then when you look back, when you are living the laid off lifestyle, if you will, and you're looking for a job because that's your priority, or your company says you'll be able to come back in 6 weeks, those 6 weeks may be a tough time. You want to have groceries for your home, for your family. So all those times when you put away the 2 cans of this or the extra roll of paper there or the extra, thing of meat in the freezer, you see where I'm going with this. None of that is insignificant. In fact, it's very significant. I went through that myself. I went through that myself. This was back on Valentine's Day, way, way back in the late 90s. Okay. In fact, the whole department was cut. We found out on that Valentine's afternoon. We were cut. I don't know what I would have done. Excuse me, please, without my 6 months of emergency fund. I don't know what I would have done. Okay. So include your stockpiling as part of your emergency funding. That is the easiest way to start. And another common sense practice, which I'm going to throw in for good measure, is to be honest with yourself at all times, especially with financials. How much do you pay out in your bills every month? How much wiggle room do you need to get not just through the month, but have a decent month to thrive and just not merely survive? At the very least, that is one of the numbers that you should obtain. And I've had videos where I just spoke about that specific aspect, the entire video. Very, very, very key, very, very important. And we will dive back into that again. But in my opinion, a great way to get started is to add up every single expense that you have every single month of your life and then throw in some extra numbers for good measure. And the immediate goal would be to obtain that figure. You will always be ahead of the game and not fall behind. This is where people have problems when they fall behind. But let's start with the basics and always remember every single can, every single thing you save in your freezer, every single meal that you divided in half and made double of, every extra cup or two or three of water you throw to your soup to stretch the soup, anything you can to expand your food, your grocery stockpile, using up all those shampoos. If you think all those things do not add up, you are very wrong. So for the ones that go ahead, I don't care if other people say, oh, that sounds so stingy. I don't agree with that. I call it being conservative. I call it planning for the future. Yes, I'm not going to just waste things that I paid for. That's all part of that mindset. But we will delve into those things, of course, as we continue on our financial and frugal lifestyle journeys. But for right now, never forget this, that stockpiling groceries is most definitely a great way to pay ourselves first.